Pseudoskeptics even on Dr. Phil. On Dr. Phil the TV shrink, they focused on a verbally violent attractive young woman who behaved like an online pseudoskeptic, bawling mindless abuse at anyone coming physically close to her within conversation range. Her mother brought her to Dr. Phil because she was making life unlivable in her own family home with her verbal violence there toward everyone. As an example of her behavior, she immediately began talking over the top of Dr. Phil, quite irrationally, abusing him. Playground taunting. It went on so long, minutes, and was so gross, the audience gasped, and ultimately laughed, as they thought she was play acting, and this was some amusing stunt. No adult could froth at the mouth with random shallow infantile abuse and be genuine. Surely. But it was. Further examples were shown. A guest came on stage, a man in a wheelchair. On sight, before he could speak, she launched a tirade of abuse at the wheelchair-bound man. She felt sick to the stomach with this individual, who was obviously responsible for his own personal injury, via drink driving of course, and she was feeling ill just looking at this pathetic failure of a person, victim of his own carelessness. In fact, she could not describe her feelings of revulsion sufficiently at the mere sight of the wheelchair-bound man, who had not yet spoken. The audience gasped, and began to laugh again, incredulous. Surely this vociferous, mindless, cruel attack on a crippled man could not be genuine. So far, the wheelchair-bound man had not even spoken. Dr. Phil interrupted her tirade of sneering at the cripple, asking for confirmation from her that it was, in fact, the wheelchair that made her sick to the stomach and so verbally violent. "Yes indeed," she said. "You have no idea how disrupted I feel about this pathetic wheelchaired individual." Words to that effect. The audience was still incredulous. Dr. Phil asked her a number of times to confirm that it was indeed actually the wheelchair that was the cause of her extreme rancor. She stubbornly insisted yes. Exactly that. "Something wrong with your ears, Dr. Phil. How many times must you be told?" she taunted to audience titters. When it was ascertained, and repeated about 5 times, with rising anger from the young woman, a surprise occurred. The silent cripple stood up from the wheelchair and walked over to her and sat right next to her. He'd turned out to be an actor. "How do you feel about me now that I am not crippled, after all?" he said. She was only momentarily lost for words. There was no hint of an apology, any regret, or, "You caught me out there," or "I was wrong." She barely broke step. She just went on abusing Dr. Phil. The audience of course found this very amusing, though still taken aback by the vacuousness of her endless stream of verbal abrasion. Note the pattern in her behavior. She talks over the top of everybody, regardless of what they say, in an attempt to shut everybody else up, shouting them down. Obvious also that she heard nothing anyone said to her. She couldn't apprehend it. Didn't want to hear it. Actively refused to hear it. Seemed to be feigning deafness. Oh, and she can't admit to being wrong. Is this sounding familiar to any online pseudoskeptics yet? Familiar to Randy devotees yet? It's certainly how you are perceived online, guys. This is the infamous widespread behavior of pseudoskeptics online, perpetually angry, sneering, belittling, taunting others, while appearing not to apprehend or comprehend online replies to them. The camera then switched to the mother in the front row, who explained that her raging, sneering daughter was in fact an extreme bully, making her impossible to live with. Does this sound familiar, online cyberbullying, pseudoskeptics? At that point another guest was brought on, an actor from a TV show called Glee. The accomplished actor plays the part of a school bully very realistically, and he was brought on to assist the counseling of this young, angry woman. An expert on bullying he was, and he began explaining that many bullies are actually confused and fearful about their sexual orientation, which makes them oversensitive and lash out at other people, to the point of physical violence. That's about all he got to say, because the angry young woman began tearing strips off him also, for playing such a low-life bully role, shouting over the top of him, drowning out this specially brought-in counselor in front of 500 million TV viewers. a Dr. Phil researcher went to accompany the angry young girl in her daily activities for one day to see just how true were the mother's reports of her daughter's extreme bullying. And it was filmed, and the audience gasped and laughed for relief when the angry young woman verbally attacked the waitress in a restaurant, sneering at her for being of Asian appearance. Humorously, what else could it be? By now, she even attacked Dr. Phil's researcher for being frumpy, plain, round-faced, and wearing black. Infantile playground taunts never ending. My lay viewer's opinion was that perhaps medication was needed in this extreme case, but Dr. Phil never mentioned that. It was plain to the audience that nothing external was the cause of this young woman's rabid verbal violence toward everyone around her. So he began asking, "What's the biggest hurt in your life?" She fobbed him off quite a few times, saying silly things like when her dog got run over, etc. Dr. Phil, long experienced, didn't fall for any of these pathetic put-offs, and kept pushing her to reveal the most damaging thing ever done to her, and at what age. How young was she, what year? And she finally blurted out, she was molested, repeatedly, "Father." And Dr. Phil said, "And so you are grief-stricken, angry and fearful, attacking everyone else first. And still, you hurt like hell," which she finally acknowledged the cause of her perpetually bellicose scattergun behavior was internal. A concealed wound she is carrying. These attributes of a wounded long-term belligerent person are identical to the behaviors of online pseudoskeptics, the randy devotees. Included are the militant atheists on YouTube, the professional atheists. Their behaviors consist of an online version of this example: molested young woman on Dr. Phil. Endless sneering, abuse, insult, verbal violence, playground taunts, being unable to listen to anything typed back to them, and arguing mindlessly, always off subject, avoiding the central issue, and having no knowledge of the subject in dispute. Because you don't need knowledge, do you, skeptics? Because all you want is to be as disputatious as possible due to the internal concealed wound that you carry, dear skeptics. The only mismatch is that a young woman, about 20, on Dr. Phil TV, did not try to pose as a scientist or prosecutor, as you skeptics all try to do online, and hopelessly fail. But, laughing out loud, she likely goes online and does just that. She is the perfectly equipped pseudoskeptics pin-up girl. And from a UK expert on pseudoskeptic behaviors, we get on the Dr. Phil show excerpt that just fits the pieces together more and more. It seems that so many of these militant atheists have come from traumatic backgrounds. There was one on YouTube who talks about how his father abandoned him, and how he would not abandon his children. He seemed very pissed off. I will send you the link from a new account. When I go on YouTube, it seems to fit in with what Dr. Pavlovitz said, that atheists, when they try to kill God, then they are trying to kill the father figure, so it is not a surprise that the militants were abused or abandoned by their father, or that other traumatic things happened to them. And golly, I have encountered online numerous rational atheists who name themselves killer of God, destroyer of God, God slayer, etc. Their common online repeated demand is that death must be total, complete extinguishment, hence their evangelizing of evolution and physical materialism being their be-all and their end-all. And it's their own total disappearance they crave so much. Utmost sympathy I have for people caught in this situation. They can't run around screaming they were molested. In fact, decades of silence is the norm from molestation victims. Understandably, it is sometimes disguised as, or emerges as, pseudoskepticism. Quite a few pseudoskeptics, professional atheists, go on and on about child abuse by priests, and attack the Catholic Church. Truth is, most molestation happens in the family home. So the Church is an irrational fixation, unless you were molested yourself, of course. Can we imagine growing up under pressures like this? Frankly, no, I certainly can't. But I do seriously question whether modern behavior online, snarling, has any benefits to the suffering skeptic whatsoever. It likely just makes it worse. Skeptics are invited to make entries below this video on the advantages to oneself of snarling, belittling, and sneering online at select groups of people, notably those a good deal happier proponents of ESP, afterlife, and religion. It almost amounts to what benefits are there in being blocked and deleted repeatedly You might also compare online with your private life. Quite different, I suspect. You snarl at your boss, calling him an irrational Christian, every day. I'll bet the boss is a lot happier than yourself. Where, in your daily personal life, does snarling, belittling, sneering, win you any discernible benefits? With, say, customers. Please list the social advantages gained, dear skeptics, your achievement awards, etc. So, wallowing in the same negative behavior every day, keeps you there, on snarling, sneering Groundhog Day. A prisoner of your own toxic mindset, intellectually enfeebling yourself, at least outwardly, frozen in a state of anger and grief. A mistake, made by way too many randy devotees, online,